The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Camilla hurried down the marble corridor, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She was already running late for the charity luncheon, and Catherine was waiting in the car outside. As she grabbed her purse from the ornate side table, something felt wrong. Her fingers instinctively reached for her left hand, searching for the familiar weight of her most precious possession. The sapphire ring was gone. Camilla's heart dropped into her stomach as she stared at her bare finger in disbelief. The ring had belonged to her grandmother, passed down through 3 generations of women in her family. It wasn't just jewelry, it was a piece of history, a connection to her past that she treasured more than any crown jewel. The deep blue sapphire, surrounded by tiny diamonds, had been on her finger every single day for the past 15 years. She frantically retraced her steps, checking every surface she might have touched that morning. The bathroom counter where she had applied her makeup was empty. The nightstand beside her bed showed no glint of precious metal. Even the kitchen, where she had briefly stopped for her morning tea, revealed nothing. Panic began to set in as she realized the ring could be anywhere in the vast palace. Catherine appeared in the doorway, elegant as always in her navy blue dress, but her expression quickly changed when she saw Camilla's distressed face. Without hesitation, she canceled the charity event and immediately began helping with the search. The 2 women, who had grown closer over the years despite their different backgrounds, worked together like a well-coordinated team. They searched every room Camilla had visited in the past 24 hours. The library, where she had read before bed, the drawing room where she had taken her evening phone calls, even the conservatory where she sometimes enjoyed her afternoon tea. Staff members quietly joined the search, understanding the significance of the missing heirloom without needing explanation. Hours passed with no success. Camilla sat heavily in her favorite armchair, fighting back tears of frustration and worry. The ring represented so much more than its monetary value. It was the last tangible connection to her beloved grandmother, who had raised her after her parents' death. The thought of losing it forever was almost unbearable. As evening approached, William returned from his official duties to find the palace in an unusual state of quiet chaos. Staff members were still searching, moving furniture and checking behind curtains with the dedication of people who understood they were looking for something irreplaceable. When Catherine explained the situation, William's expression grew serious. He knew how much that ring meant to Camilla, having heard the stories of her grandmother's strength and wisdom many times over family dinners. The search expanded beyond the immediate family quarters. Security footage was reviewed, though it showed nothing helpful. Even the palace gardens were combed through in case the ring had somehow fallen outside during Camilla's morning walk. But as night fell, hope began to fade. The ring seemed to have vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions and a growing sense of loss that settled over the palace like a heavy blanket. 3 days had passed since the ring disappeared, and the atmosphere in the palace remained tense. Camilla tried to maintain her usual composure during public appearances, but those closest to her could see the sadness in her eyes. She had barely slept, constantly replaying her movements from that fateful morning, wondering if there was somewhere they hadn't looked. William had taken it upon himself to coordinate the search efforts with military precision. He created detailed maps of the palace, marking off areas as they were thoroughly examined. The staff, inspired by his dedication, worked with renewed energy. Even the groundskeepers joined in, carefully examining every flower bed and pathway where Camilla might have walked. Catherine suggested they contact the insurance company and local jewelers, in case someone tried to sell the ring. The description was circulated discreetly among London's most reputable dealers, though everyone hoped it wouldn't come to that. The ring's unique setting and the family engraving inside the band would make it easily identifiable to anyone who knew what to look for. Meanwhile, rumors began to circulate among the palace staff. Some whispered that the ring might have been stolen, though nothing else was missing from Camilla's jewelry collection. Others suggested it might have fallen into a drain or been accidentally thrown away with something else. The theories grew more elaborate with each passing day, but none brought them any closer to finding the precious heirloom. William decided to expand the search beyond the obvious locations. He reasoned that if the ring had been lost during routine activities, it might be in a place that seemed unlikely at first glance. This new approach led him to areas of the palace that were rarely visited by family members: storage rooms, utility areas, and service corridors that connected different wings of the building. The kitchen staff remembered that Camilla had visited the main kitchen that morning to discuss the menu for an upcoming dinner party. The head chef, Mrs. Morrison, had been honored by the personal visit and eager to please. She recalled that Camilla had sampled several dishes and even helped arrange flowers for the presentation. It was possible, though unlikely, that the ring had come off during these activities. Every surface in the kitchen was examined once again, this time with even greater attention to detail. They checked inside mixing bowls behind appliances, and even in the large industrial dishwashers. The staff drainage systems were inspected, though this seemed like a long shot. The kitchen had been thoroughly cleaned multiple times since that morning, making it unlikely that the ring would still be there if it had ever been. As the search continued, William found himself thinking about his own grandmother's jewelry and the stories attached to each piece. He understood that for Camilla, this wasn't just about losing something valuable. It was about losing a piece of her personal history. The ring connected her to a woman who had shaped her character and values, someone whose memory she honored every day. The pressure was mounting from unexpected sources. Word of the missing ring had somehow leaked beyond the palace walls, and discreet inquiries were being made by people who had no business knowing about private family matters. William realized they needed to find the ring soon, not just for Camilla's peace of mind, but to prevent the situation from becoming a public relations nightmare that could overshadow important royal duties and charitable work. A week had passed and the search was beginning to feel hopeless. Camilla had privately begun to accept that her grandmother's ring might be gone forever. She had even started looking at replacement rings. Though nothing could truly replace the sentimental value of the original, the family continued their daily routines, but there was an underlying sadness that everyone could feel. William, however, refused to give up. His methodical nature wouldn't allow him to stop searching until every possible location had been examined. He had developed an almost obsessive determination to solve this mystery, partly because he genuinely cared about Camilla's happiness, but also because the puzzle itself had captured his attention. Where could a ring disappear to in a building where every inch was monitored and maintained? On this particular morning, William decided to investigate an area that had been overlooked: the old service tunnels that ran beneath parts of the palace. These tunnels, built centuries ago, were rarely used except for maintenance work. They connected various buildings and provided access to utility systems that kept the palace running. Most family members never even thought about these hidden passages that existed beneath their feet. Armed with a powerful flashlight and wearing clothes he didn't mind getting dirty, William descended into the tunnels through an access point in the basement. The air was cooler down there, and the walls were lined with pipes and electrical conduits that hummed quietly in the darkness. It seemed impossible that Camilla could have lost her ring in such a place, but William's thoroughness demanded that he check everywhere. As he made his way through the narrow passages, William's mind wandered to all the generations of royals who had lived in the palace before them. These tunnels had probably seen centuries of secrets, hidden meetings, and clandestine activities. The thought made him smile despite the serious nature of his mission. History seemed to live in every stone of this place. The tunnel system was more extensive than he had realized. Passages branched off in multiple directions, some leading to dead ends, others connecting to distant parts of the palace grounds. William marked his route carefully, not wanting to get lost in the maze of underground corridors. His flashlight beam revealed decades of dust, occasional spider webs, and the odd piece of forgotten maintenance equipment. After nearly 2 hours of searching, William was about to give up on this particular area when his flashlight caught something unusual. In a section where 2 tunnels intersected, there was a small opening in the wall, probably an old coal chute or storage space from the building's earlier days. Something about it drew his attention, perhaps because it was the only place in the tunnels that wasn't perfectly maintained and organized. He squeezed through the narrow opening and found himself in a tiny chamber that had clearly been forgotten by time. The space was filled with old furniture covered in dust sheets, boxes of papers that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades, and various artifacts that must have been stored there and then forgotten. It was like discovering a secret room in a museum. William began to examine the stored items more carefully, moving aside heavy boxes and lifting dust covers with growing curiosity. This wasn't just storage, it was like a repository of palace history that had been sealed away and forgotten. There were old photographs, documents with official seals, and personal items that must have belonged to previous residents of the palace. As he worked deeper into the small space, William realized he might have stumbled upon something significant. But more importantly for his current mission, he noticed that some of the items had been disturbed recently. The dust patterns weren't uniform, and there were signs that someone had been in this space within the past few weeks. His heart began to race as he realized this discovery might somehow be connected to the missing ring. William's discovery in the hidden chamber had opened up an entirely new line of investigation. The disturbed dust and recent activity in a supposedly forgotten storage space suggested that someone had been using this area without authorization. But who would have access to these tunnels, and why would they be hiding things in such a remote location? He carefully photographed everything before touching anything, his training and security protocols taking over. The items that had been recently moved included several small boxes, old documents, and what appeared to be personal belongings. Most intriguingly, there was a modern flashlight hidden behind an antique trunk, proof that someone had been visiting this space regularly. When William emerged from the tunnels and shared his discovery with the head of palace security, the implications became clear. Someone with inside knowledge of the building's layout had been using the forgotten chamber for their own purposes. The security team immediately began reviewing staff access records and security footage from areas near the tunnel entrances. The investigation took an unexpected turn when they discovered that one of the newer staff members, a maintenance worker named James Crawford, had been accessing areas of the palace that weren't part of his assigned duties. Crawford had been hired 6 months earlier and had quickly gained a reputation as a dedicated worker who often stayed late to complete projects. When questioned, Crawford initially denied any knowledge of the hidden chamber. But when confronted with evidence of his unusual access patterns and the discovery of his personal flashlight in the storage space, he finally broke down and confessed to using the area as a private retreat. He claimed he had found the space by accident and had been using it to take breaks away from the busy palace environment. Crawford's story was believable enough, but it didn't explain the connection to Camilla's missing ring. William pressed him for more details about what he had seen or moved in the chamber. After much hesitation, Crawford admitted that he had been collecting small items that he found around the palace. Nothing valuable, he insisted. Just forgotten objects that no one would miss. The revelation that Crawford had been essentially scavenging items from around the palace sent shockwaves through the security team. Even if he hadn't intentionally stolen anything valuable, his behavior represented a serious breach of trust and protocol. Palace staff were expected to maintain the highest standards of integrity, and taking any items, no matter how seemingly worthless, was completely unacceptable. Under intense questioning, Crawford finally revealed the location of his collected items. Hidden in various parts of the chamber were small objects he had gathered over months of work: lost buttons, forgotten pens, small tools, and other miscellaneous items that had caught his attention. His collection was like a magpie's nest of random objects that had accumulated over time. Among these items was a small jewelry box that Crawford claimed to have, found in a wastebasket in one of the guest bedrooms. He had assumed it was empty and had taken it simply because he liked its ornate design. When William opened the box with trembling hands, his heart nearly stopped. There, nestled in faded velvet lining, was Camilla's missing sapphire ring. The discovery raised more questions than it answered. How had the ring ended up in a wastebasket in a guest bedroom? Camilla was certain she hadn't been in that room recently, and the cleaning staff insisted they would never throw away anything that looked valuable. The mystery of how the ring had traveled from Camilla's finger to that particular location remained unsolved, but at least the precious heirloom was finally safe. Crawford's explanation was that he had found the jewelry box during a routine maintenance check of the guest quarters. He had opened it out of curiosity, but claimed he hadn't noticed the ring inside because it had been wrapped in tissue paper. Whether this story was completely true remained unclear, but the important thing was that the ring had been recovered undamaged and ready to return to its rightful owner. The moment William walked into the family sitting room holding the small jewelry box, Camilla knew immediately what he had found. Her hands flew to her mouth as tears of relief began to form in her eyes. Catherine, who had been reading nearby, looked up in amazement as William carefully placed the box in Camilla's trembling hands. When Camilla opened the box and saw her grandmother's ring nestled safely inside, the emotion that had been building for over a week finally overwhelmed her. She clutched the ring to her chest and wept openly, not caring about royal protocol or maintaining composure. The relief was so intense that it felt almost physical, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. William sat down beside her and gently explained how he had found the ring in the hidden chamber beneath the palace. He carefully avoided mentioning the more scandalous details of Crawford's collection, focusing instead on the fact that the ring had been recovered safely and appeared to be undamaged. Camilla listened with wonder, hardly able to believe the strange journey her precious heirloom had taken. As she slipped the ring back onto her finger, Camilla felt a profound sense of completeness return to her life. The familiar weight of the sapphire and diamonds felt like coming home after a long and difficult journey. She had realized during the week of searching just how much the ring meant to her. It wasn't just jewelry, but a daily reminder of her grandmother's love and guidance. Catherine suggested they have a quiet celebration dinner to mark the ring's return. The idea appealed to everyone, as the past week had been emotionally draining for the entire family. Even the staff seemed to sense that the crisis had passed. And there was a lighter atmosphere throughout the palace that evening. During dinner, the conversation naturally turned to the mystery of how the ring had ended up in the guest bedroom wastebasket. Camilla racked her brain trying to remember any connection to that room, but she was certain she hadn't been there recently. The guest quarters were typically used only when they had overnight visitors, and there had been none in the past month. William shared more details about the hidden chamber and its contents, describing it as like stepping back in time. The forgotten storage space had apparently been used by various palace residents over the decades to hide away items they wanted to keep private. Some of the documents he had found dated back several generations, suggesting the space had been a secret repository for much longer than anyone realized. The discovery of Crawford's collection had raised serious questions about palace security and staff oversight. How had one person been able to access restricted areas and accumulate items over several months without being detected? The incident had exposed weaknesses in the monitoring systems that would need to be addressed to prevent similar situations in the future. Despite the troubling aspects of how the ring had been found, Camilla chose to focus on the positive outcome. Her precious heirloom was back where it belonged, and the ordeal had reminded her of how much support she had from her family. William's determination to keep searching when others might have given up had touched her deeply. As the evening wound down, Camilla found herself looking at the ring with new appreciation. The sapphire seemed to catch the light differently, as if it were happy to be home. She thought about her grandmother and how proud she would have been to see the family come together to find this precious link to their shared past. The experience had also strengthened the bond between Camilla and William in an unexpected way. His dedication to solving the mystery had shown a side of his character that she had always suspected but never fully seen. He had approached the search with the same methodical determination that he brought to his official duties, treating her personal crisis with the seriousness it deserved. The aftermath of finding the ring brought unexpected revelations that would change how the family viewed palace security forever. William's investigation into Crawford's activities had uncovered a network of hidden spaces and forgotten passages that even the senior staff didn't know existed. The palace, it seemed, held more secrets than anyone had imagined. Crawford's employment was quietly terminated, but not before he provided detailed information about all the areas he had explored during his time at the palace. His knowledge of the building's hidden infrastructure was surprisingly extensive, revealing maintenance tunnels, old servant passages, and storage spaces that had been sealed off and forgotten over the years. The security review that followed Crawford's dismissal led to some startling discoveries. Several areas of the palace had been accessible without proper monitoring, and there were gaps in the surveillance system that could have been exploited by someone with malicious intent. While Crawford appeared to have been motivated by curiosity rather than criminal behavior, his activities highlighted serious vulnerabilities. William took personal responsibility for overseeing the security improvements that resulted from the investigation. New monitoring systems were installed, access protocols were updated, and detailed maps were created of all the previously unknown spaces within the palace complex. The process took several months and required coordination with historical preservation experts to ensure that no architectural heritage was damaged. During this process, they made some fascinating historical discoveries. Hidden within the walls and forgotten chambers were documents, personal items, and artifacts that provided new insights into the lives of previous royal residents. Some of these findings were so significant that historians were brought in to properly catalog and preserve them. Camilla's ring incident had inadvertently led to the most comprehensive security audit in the palace's modern history. What had started as a personal crisis had evolved into an opportunity to better protect both the royal family and the countless historical treasures housed within the palace walls. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that a missing piece of jewelry had revealed such important security gaps. The guest bedroom where Crawford claimed to have found the jewelry box also yielded some surprises during the detailed investigation. Behind a loose panel in the wardrobe, workers discovered a small collection of letters and photographs that had apparently been hidden there decades earlier. These personal items belonged to a previous generation and told intimate stories of palace life during a different era. One particularly intriguing discovery was a diary entry that mentioned a sapphire ring matching the description of Camilla's heirloom. The entry, written by a palace resident from the 1960s, described lending the ring to a guest who had forgotten to pack appropriate jewelry for a formal dinner. This provided a possible explanation for how the ring might have ended up in the guest quarters, though the timeline didn't quite match with recent events. The mystery of how Camilla's ring had made its way to the guest bedroom remained partially unsolved, but the family had learned to accept that some questions might never have clear answers. The important thing was that the ring was back where it belonged, and the palace was now more secure than it had ever been. Catherine suggested that they should document this entire experience, partly for family history and partly as a reminder of how quickly things can change. What had seemed like a simple case of a lost piece of jewelry had revealed layers of complexity that none of them had anticipated. The story would certainly become part of family lore, passed down to future generations. As the security improvements neared completion, William reflected on how the search for the ring had changed his relationship with the palace itself. He now saw the building not just as a home and workplace, but as a living piece of history with its own secrets and stories. Every corridor and room held the potential for discovery, and he had developed a deeper appreciation for the generations of people who had called this place home. 6 months after the ring's recovery, life at the palace had settled into a new normal that incorporated all the lessons learned from the incident. The security improvements were complete, and the family felt more confident about the protection of both their personal belongings and the historical treasures under their care. The experience had brought them closer together and had given them a deeper appreciation for their unique living situation. Camilla never took her grandmother's ring for granted again. She had developed a daily ritual of consciously noting its presence on her finger, a small reminder of both its safe return and the love it represented. The ordeal had taught her that even the most precious things could disappear without warning, making every moment with them more meaningful. William had discovered a passion for palace history that surprised even him. The investigation had introduced him to aspects of the building's past that fascinated him, and he had begun working with historians to properly document and preserve the items found in the hidden chambers. Several significant artifacts were now being prepared for eventual display in the palace's public areas. The staff changes that followed Crawford's departure had ultimately strengthened the palace team. New employees were subject to more thorough background checks and training, and there was a renewed emphasis on the importance of integrity and trustworthiness in their roles. The incident had served as a reminder that everyone who worked in the palace was a guardian of history and tradition. Catherine often reflected on how the search for the ring had revealed character traits in her family that she had always suspected but never fully witnessed. William's methodical determination and refusal to give up had impressed her, while Camilla's grace under pressure and focus on gratitude rather than blame had been inspiring. The crisis had shown them all at their best. The mystery elements of the case were never fully resolved, and the family had learned to live with some unanswered questions. How exactly had the ring traveled from Camilla's finger to the guest bedroom? Had Crawford's story about finding it in a wastebasket been completely truthful? These questions remained, but they no longer seemed as important as they once had. The hidden chamber beneath the palace had been officially sealed and integrated into the security monitoring system, but not before yielding one final surprise. Among the last items to be removed was a small wooden box containing letters written by previous royal residents to future generations. These messages, some dating back over a century, spoke of hope, love, and the responsibility that came with living in such a historically significant place. One letter in particular had moved the entire family to tears. Written by a royal matriarch during World War II, it spoke about hiding precious family heirlooms during the bombing of London and the importance of preserving connections to the past, even in times of great uncertainty. The letter's message about the power of family, treasures to connect generations, felt especially relevant. Given their recent experience, Camilla had decided to add her own letter to the collection before the chamber was sealed. In it, she wrote about the week when her grandmother's ring went missing, and how its recovery had reminded her of the importance of family, persistence, and hope. She wanted future generations to know that even in an age of advanced security systems and modern conveniences, the most important treasures were still the connections between people and the love that passed from one generation to the next. As she finished writing the letter, Camilla looked down at her grandmother's ring sparkling in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the palace windows. The sapphire seemed to hold all the stories of the women who had worn it before her, and she felt a deep sense of responsibility to honor their memory. The ring's brief disappearance had only strengthened its significance, turning it from a beautiful piece of jewelry into a symbol of resilience, family bonds, and the unexpected ways that love could survive even the most challenging circumstances. The entire experience had taught them all that sometimes the most valuable discoveries come from the most unexpected places, and that the journey to find what you've lost can be just as important as the destination. They had found more than just a missing ring. They had found a deeper appreciation for each other and for the remarkable place they called home.